Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you how to make an Azure Container Instance HTTPS using Caddy and using Terraform. So by default, Azure Container Instances can't be accessed over HTTPS, and so that's what I'm going to be showing you today. I've already imported the provider that I want, which is for Azure, and I've also specified that I want to store the state in a container they've previously set up on Azure. If you want to see more about that, you can head to my previous video on getting started with Azure in Terraform in Azure and check that out. So first off, I'm specifying that I want to create a new resource, and that resource type is Azure RM resource group. Then I give that a name that I can access throughout the Terraform file so that I can access the different properties that I'm defining here. So the first property is a name, which is basically the name of the resource group inside Azure, and then I can also specify the location that I want it to be at. So the location is just Australia East for me because I've decided that's the best location to match my individual location. I'm based in New Zealand, so that's a good location for me. Next, I'm going to want to set up some storage accounts. So a storage account is basically going to be used by Caddy to store the SSL certificate that it generates. And the reason that I want to store this rather than just request a new one each time it's deployed is if you're deploying regularly, you can actually get to a place where you hit the rate limit for Let's Encrypt because Caddy's using that free Let's Encrypt service to provide you with HTTPS for free. So first off, I'm just going to go ahead and set up a new resource, and the type is Azure RM storage account, and I'm giving that the name ACI Caddy. Then I'm going to want to give that a few properties. So one's the name. Then I want to specify the resource group name. So here I can refer to the resource group that I've already created, and so they're not hard coding the name. So if I change that name, it would automatically reference the correct resource group. I'm also doing the same for location, and I'm just specifying they want standard access tier, or account tier. And for a replication type, I want locally redundant storage. You can see all the different properties you can specify on the Terraform documentation. So you can just look at the different resource that you're wanting to create. And then from there, you can see the properties available, what types are available, and it gives you quite good examples of how to actually set them up. If you wanted to reference an existing storage account, you can actually use data. So data is data basically allows you to access something pre-existing. I won't cover that now, but I will cover it in a later tutorial. Then I'm going to set up a storage share, so I'm just going to give that a name, ACI Caddy Data. And I'm going to give that a storage account name from the previously created storage account. And I'm giving it a quota, which I think is just what size of space you want to allow. And I've just specified one, which I believe is 1 gigabyte. You can check out the full details on the documentation on Terraform. So now that I've got my storage account and storage share set up, I can actually go ahead and set up my HTTPS container. So first off, I'm just going to show you how it would look like if I didn't set it up with Caddy, so without HTTPS. So what you're going to need to do when you're creating a container instance in Azure is you're going to first want to specify that you want to create a resource of type Azure RM container group, and you'll give that a name. Then within that, you're actually going to specify what containers you want. So you'll give that a name, that will be referenced inside Azure. You can give that a location. I'm just going to use that same location as my resource group. And then I'm going to specify that I want that container group inside that specific resource group I've already created. For IP address type, I'm just going to specify public. DNS name label is basically what domain you're going to access it from, like the subdomain that you'll be accessing it from. So I'm just going to call mine MC Terraform HTTPS. If that's taken already, it will fail. And I'm going to use the operating system type of Linux. So now I want to specify my container. I'm actually going to set up a RabbitMQ container here. What I've found is if your container is running on port 80, that can make it really hard to configure Caddy correctly. So it's good if your container is running on a different port. If you face any issues, just give that a try. So yeah, I'm going to use this RabbitMQ management image. I'm going to set the CPU and memory to 0.5. You can actually easily increase this at any point, and if you've checked this into your version control system, it's just going to give you a nice record of what changes you've made. So you can have alerts, which I'll show you a bit later, on the memory and CPU, and so if you notice it's not quite enough, you can adjust it. So this management portal is actually running on port 156072, and its protocol is TCP. I'm also just wanting to show you how to set some environment variables, which can help you configure your Docker container. So I'm going to just set the RabbitMQ default user and password. So that will allow me to set the default user and password that you can log in with when the container is first created. I'm not giving these great users and passwords. They're just user and password. So yeah, you can actually specify secure environment variables as well. And I think in that way, it doesn't get output at some point. I can't remember exactly when. Maybe in the logs when you're doing your plan or something like that. Then I want to expose the port 15672 so that I can access it from that Azure Container Instance URL. Once I've done, I can do a Terraform init. That's just going to go and make sure everything's initialized correctly. You can actually run this as many times as you want. It's not going to cause any issues to run it repeatedly, so it's good best practice if you have a build pipeline to just run that before you run your apply. And then I'm just going to run my apply, which is basically going to create my container in Azure. So once apply's ready, it will sort of output what changes will be made, and you can agree to them. You can actually specify some command line arguments that will auto-approve, in which case you won't need to specify yes. That's useful when you're running it from a build pipeline. Then it's going to go through and create all of the different resources you've specified, and then it'll tell you about that. So if we head over to Azure, we can see our created resources. You can see I've got this RabbitMQ container running here, and if I go to the IP address associated with that and the port number, it's going to load our RabbitMQ management portal. If I enter in the user and password, then it's going to log me in. So that user and password is the ones I've specified as environment variables. Now I'm just going to go back to my code. I want to set this up as an HTTPS container, as currently it is just a container that is running on HTTP. So I'm going to expose the ports 80, which is HTTP, and 443, which is HTTPS. and I'm going to create my Caddy container. So I specify that I want a container, I give it a name, so it's just going to be called Caddy. Specify the image I want, once again this is just Caddy. I can specify memory and CPU once again. And I can adjust that if I need to later on, and it will just run and make the necessary adjustments if I ran a Terraform apply. I want to specify what ports I have, so I'm going to have port 443 and I'm going to have port 80, much like I specified in the exposed ports. And the protocol is TCP. To do that same thing, but for port 443. So this is basically where I'm going to specify how it's going to connect to the Azure storage account that I've created and save the different SSL certificates. So I'm going to specify the storage account name, and I'm going to refer to the one that I've created previously in my Terraform file. So I want to use this ACI Caddy storage account. I'm just going to get that name property. Then I'm going to also want to get that access key for that account. So I'm going to get the primary access key. And then I want to provide the share name. So I also want to refer to that share that I've created previously. So Azure RM storage share.aci caddy. And I want to get that name property. So it's basically going to specify where I'm going to save my certificates. And then I want some commands that I'm going to run. So this command is basically going to reverse proxy from the HTTPS port of the Azure Container Instance URL to localhost 15672, which is our RabbitMQ container. So we're going from our URL, which aligns with what we specified for the DNS label, so MC Terraform HTTPS, dot location, so Australia East for me, dot Azure Container Instance, dot IO, and then I'm going to do that too. So from reverse proxying from that URL to localhost 15672. So that will basically forward me from that URL on HTTPS to the RabbitMQ instance, and so it will allow me to run that RabbitMQ on HTTPS. So if I go Terraform apply, it's going to pick up what changes haven't already been made, and it does that using the Terraform state file. So you can see it says 1 to add, 1 to destroy. So some changes might mean that it fully has to destroy whatever's already been set up, and that's okay. So now I'm just going to go to that containers here, the containers. When I open that, I can see that Caddy and RabbitMQ are running. If I check the logs for Caddy, you can see that if I go down to the bottom, it says certificate obtained successfully, which means that my URL should be able to connect to RabbitMQ. If I go to the HTTPS, you can see that's secure. It says connection is secure. It's got that little lock there. and I can enter my user and password and happily go about my RabbitMQ container ways with it all being secure. So this is just the normal RabbitMQ dashboard. So now if I head back to my Terraform file, I can actually go ahead and show you how to create some alerts. So the reason you might want to create alerts is to make sure that your instances are all healthy and up and functional and available at all times. So first off, you might want to specify an action group. An action group can sort of receive the alerts in various different ways. So you can have like webhooks and stuff like that. I'm just going to set up a very simple one that gets emails. So if something goes wrong, an alert is triggered that I've specified, it is going to go and just email any users in this action group. So I'm going to give that group a name. I'm just going to call it MC group, and I'm going to specify which resource group it belongs to. Once again, I can refer to the resource group that I've created previously in this Terraform file. You're also going to want to give it a short name. So like I said, I want to specify this to have an email recipient. And so I'm just going to give this a name. So MC Action Group, and I'm just going to specify the email that I want to receive emails on. So that email is going to be mc@tripwiretech.com. Oh, sorry, I've missed that equal sign there. My keyboard is a bit glitchy sometimes, so yeah, sorry about that. So when you've specified your action group, you can go ahead and start creating the different alerts you want to, and they will cause an email to be sent if they are triggered, and then the appropriate person can deal with it and make sure that the services that you've provisioned aren't down. So first off, the main type of alert is a monitor metric alert. So I'm specifying the resource type that I want to create as a Azure monitor metric alert. And I'm going to want to monitor the CPU for this one. So I'm just going to specify the name CPU as my alert name that I can refer to throughout this Terraform file. So I'm giving that a name that will be visible by also in Azure, and I'm going to specify which resource group. So I'm just going to use that same one that I've been using all this time, as it's related to all my different resources for this tutorial. Then I want to specify a scope. That's basically what it's monitoring. So I want it to monitor that Azure container group, basically to see if there's any CPU greater than 90%. And if there is, then I want to trigger an alert because it's a sign that performance might start degrading soon. So yeah, you can give that a description so it's clear what that alert is for. So action will be triggered when the CPU exceeds 90%. Then you want to specify the criteria for your alert. So this is where I specify what metric I want to monitor. So I want the metric name of CPU usage to be monitored. Oh, sorry. Actually, here I need to specify what I am monitoring, and from there it will allow me to specify what metric I want to monitor. So this just sort of allows it to link it back to that Azure container group. So I've got Microsoft.container instance/container groups because that's what sort of resource I want to monitor. And then I specify the metric name of the CPU usage. You also need to specify how you're going to aggregate this, and I'm just going to average this data. and I want to check when the value is greater than 90. So the threshold I'm going to set is 90 and the operator is greater than. And so whenever that CPU usage exceeds 90%, it's going to trigger this action here that I'm going to specify. And I'm just going to want to specify what action group I've already created. So I'm just going to specify this MC action group, and I just want to pass that ID there. I'm going to do this exact same thing for memory usage as well, as that's another useful thing to monitor, as my containers might be low on memory at times. Pretty much can stay mostly the same. The only difference is going to be my metric name is now going to be memory usage, and I can update my description and my name. So I'll just update that metric name, and that will add my memory alert. So the final one I want to monitor is a different type. It's going to be the resource health. So it's basically going to tell me if the resource health status changes. So maybe it's like not functioning at all. I want to know. So yeah, it's a good one, overall one to monitor. So I'm just going to update this description, and from there I'll be able to update also the criteria which will trigger this metric alert. So basically I'm just going to trigger an action when the resource health changes. I want to, this is a different type, so it's got a different type of criteria. It just needs a category, so I'm going to specify the category is resource health. And actually, because it's a different type of criteria, it's actually a different resource type, so I'm going to need to update this Azure RM monitor metric alert to be Azure RM monitor activity log alert. So basically it's going to be an alert that's generated from the activity log rather than different metrics that we're measuring against the container. So I can provide that same action group because I want that same email. And when I'm happy with my different metrics, I can go a Terraform apply. That's basically going to go off and create anything that hasn't already been created. So this time it's going to just go off and create those alerts and that action group. So you can see it's created all these different things, or it's saying it wants to create these different things. You need to specify that you actually do want to create them by entering yes, and then it'll go ahead and create them. Oh yeah, just a heads up, you can actually run the command Terraform destroy to tear down anything you've created previously at any point in time. It'll just gracefully tear those down so that you're not paying for them. So a use case for that might be just you're doing a proof of concept, want to quickly check something out and then tear it down after. Or another thing might be you're not quite ready to go live, so you might want to go ahead and tear things down at the end of each build pipeline, but you just want everything sort of set up, ready to go, so you can just pull out that destroy command when you're ready to go live, and it will just keep all your resources there. So yeah, that's another reason why you might use Terraform destroy, just to bring down your resources quickly. Because you don't want to be paying for your resources when you're not using them, obviously, because things get expensive. All our new alerts are created. Let's head on over to Azure. You can head to this alerts part, and it's going to list out all our different alerts. So I want to just check out my alert rules, and those are the ones that I've configured in the Terraform file. You can see CPU, memory, and resource health. And so I'm going to get alerts on all of those for any of my containers here. You create the action group in Azure Terraform, you're going to get an email much like this. It just specifies that you've been added to the action group if your email address was supplied there. And you can also get the alerts, and they'll look something like this if the alert is triggered. I hope you've enjoyed today's tutorial, and I hope you'll find it useful. If you have, please like and subscribe for more content. I plan on doing quite a few more Terraform videos.